Introductions. Just Kirsty Burrows, I think, who's in the dark, but she is there. Who's going to be speaking to us about the Baby Friendly Initiative in just a minute. Apologies, Julie?
Yeah, got apologies from Guy, Rosie Stewart, and we've got Julian's is arriving at 11 o'clock, and apologies from Liz Chapman.
That's okay. Thank you very much for that. Declarations of interest, anyone? Minutes of the last formal meeting of Council of Governors. Any corrections, please? September meeting now. In which case, we get on to something interesting. Kirsty Burrows, Professional Development Lead for Infant Feeding, is going to talk to us about the UNICEF Baby Friendly Initiative. So, Kirsty, over to you.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. I've got a brief presentation to share with you all. So bear with me 2 seconds while I just upload the presentation.
Thank you.
And apologies, I am somewhat in the dark, but it's catch-22 in here that I'm either in full glowing sunshine or pitch black dark. So it never seems to equal itself out. As I said earlier, the joys of actually having a nice sunny, bright day means that I'm somewhat darkened, but I am here. Just waiting for the presentation to upload itself.
Did you put on lots of sun cream?
No sun cream.
It's just taking its time this morning. I'll introduce myself first. So as you said, my name's Kirsty Burrows. I'm Professional Development Lead and Infant Feeding Lead. So I have a joint title and it's for the Health Visiting Service across Berkshire Healthcare. So I'm responsible for all things infant feeding across the trust, responsible for training, all the staff, for introducing new policies, introducing new guidance, as well as project lead for the Baby Friendly Initiative. And my other role is Professional Development Lead for the Health Visiting Service, which is predominantly project-based. So I'm responsible for leading and implementing lots of projects, lots of new innovations to try and improve and innovate within the Health Visiting Service. So that's a little bit about me. Is everybody able to see that presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Thank you.
So my background is midwifery. I'm a qualified midwife and came into health visiting in Berkshire Healthcare in 2013, where I was a health visitor in Slough for 3 or 4 years before they went over to a different provider. But I remained with Berkshire Healthcare and came over to Reading and started in the role that I'm in now. So this is where we're at. OK, the Baby Friendly Initiative. What is it? Anybody heard of it? Anybody aware of it? So the Baby Friendly Hospital Initiative has been adopted throughout the world. It was introduced as a joint programme of the World Health Organization and UNICEF to help address poor hospital practices and really aggressive marketing practices by formula milk companies, which together contributed to a massive decrease in breastfeeding from the 1950s onwards. They dropped the word hospital from the title of the programme when it came to the UK in 1994 because most of maternity care and community services, health visiting, for example, was done in community. So actually hospital had no merit. The community aspect of the programme was introduced to look at providing an equivalent set of standards for the work of health visitors and other community-based staff, such as our children's centres, with the aim of addressing the decline in breastfeeding continuation rates. They then introduced some university standards to make sure that midwifery and health visiting students had a strong foundation of knowledge and were fit for practice, fundamentally, to make sure that they're providing the best infant feeding support when they qualified. There was a major evidence-based review which was undertaken in 2012, and the original 10 steps that were produced when the programme started were incorporated into a much more holistic set of standards which looked at a much broader approach to infant feeding in the UK. Early years development and relationship building was then incorporated into these standards because it became clear that the way that we feed and nurture our babies has long-term consequences for well-being and development. As part of that review, a completely new set of standards was developed to enhance care for families whose babies are admitted to the neonatal units, making sure that parents are partners in care and recognising the crucial role they play in supporting their baby. And in 2017, another review was carried out, and the Achieving Sustainability Standards, which is really what I'm here to talk about today, were launched, and they were designed to support services which have embedded the baby-friendly standards to ensure systems are in place to sustain and protect the service in the long term. So why do we need the baby-friendly in the UK? What's the point of it? So we have some of the lowest breastfeeding rates in the world in the UK. So around 80% of mothers will start breastfeeding, but only 40% are still breastfeeding at age 4 months. That's a huge decline in breastfeeding rates. We do have large differences in rates from socioeconomic divides, ranging from around 17% in some lower socioeconomic groups to around 92% in higher socioeconomic groups. In the UK, 8 out of 10 mothers will stop breastfeeding before they wanted to, with many reporting that they couldn't breastfeed. Yet we know that primary lactation failure is very, very rare. So fundamentally, the main cause of stopping breastfeeding is lack of support. In the UK, breastfeeding is a highly emotive subject because so many families have not breastfed, have not seen breastfeeding. It's not normal. We are a bottle feeding culture now. And because you don't have that experience of watching or seeing or understanding, you tend to fear it more. We've got extensive and resounding evidence around the benefits of breastfeeding, which provide a compelling case to change these prevailing attitudes and practices. A recent large-scale research funded by the Gates Foundation looks at the highlights and talks about the practical, emotional and cultural barriers that still stand in the way of women breastfeeding, and underlines the importance of breastfeeding in improving health, saving lives and reducing costs in every single country in the world, rich or poor. We know that breastfeeding is a societal issue and there are so many barriers that a mother has to overcome if she needs to be able to succeed her goal. So we need to change the conversation around breastfeeding. It's time to stop laying the blame for the UK's low breastfeeding rates in the laps of individual women, and instead acknowledge that this is a public health imperative for which government, policymakers, communities and families all share responsibility. So although the benefits of breastfeeding are more widely known since the introduction of Baby Friendly to the UK, and more women are starting to breastfeed, there are still numerous barriers to overcome, such as advertising, pressure from family and friends, the impact of media, and a general lack of belief that most women can do it. Whilst we have seen an increase in initiation rates, which have risen from around 30% in the 1970s to where we are now with a much higher rate of around 70%, our continuation rates are the problem. Our continuation rates are the ones that remain very, very low. Baby Friendly was introduced to help stem that decline in breastfeeding. And it has been successful in a climate where maternity care has changed significantly, with earlier discharges from hospital, fewer home visits, and a lack of continuity of carer. We know that having those meaningful conversations in pregnancy can have a positive influence. So the standards aim to make this a reality. You only need to look at smoking as an example of the value of action at a government level. All the health information has been out there for some time, hasn't it? But it was the government interventions of banning smoking in public places, plain packaging and no advertising, which actually resulted in the biggest smoking decrease. So not breastfeeding costs worldwide around $302 billion a year, and formula milk production is estimated to be worth around $54 billion a year, which is a huge amount. The results from a study published in The Lancet in 2016 highlight that there are so many determinants of breastfeeding and the need for supportive measures at many different levels, from legal and policy directives to social attitudes and values, women's work and employment conditions, and healthcare services. Although a worldwide study, the failures are clear within our higher socio-economic climate. The culture needs to change and the change needs support from the top down. So UNICEF's UK's Preventing Disease and Saving Resources report, written by a multi-university team, shows that increase in breastfeeding could see millions in potential annual savings to the NHS. The report findings demonstrate that for just 5 illnesses for which breastfeeding offers protection, such as chest infections, ear infections, nose, throat infections, gastro, tummy problems in babies, moderate increases in breastfeeding rates would actually translate into cost savings for the NHS of up to £50 million a year and tens of thousands fewer hospital admissions and GP appointments. That's quite powerful on its own. That's quite powerful. And the state of the NHS at the moment, that data actually means an awful lot. So let's look locally. It's great to have an understanding of UNICEF, but what's actually happening in Berkshire? So the aggregate breastfeeding rate for data collected in 21-22 for England was based on information provided by 145 reporting local authorities, which found that 49.3% of mothers were still breastfeeding at 6 to 8 weeks. This was higher than it was in 2020-21, which was 47.6%. So there has been an increase. So across Berkshire Healthcare, we can see our total and partial breastfeeding figure for mothers still breastfeeding at 6 to 8 week appointment was quite significantly above the national average at 61.5%. But what's this down to? So this is about us. This is our BFI journey for Berkshire Healthcare and the Health Visiting Service. So the information on this slide demonstrates our journey to full accreditation and re-accreditation. The steps up to 2017 were awarded when the trust was separated into East and West, and re-accreditation of the service in 2017 involved health visiting services across all 6 local authorities. We then lost both of the East localities and we were re-accredited last year in 2021, a very, very different journey to our 2017 accreditation because it was all virtual because of COVID. But we maintained our accreditation through some really tough, significant times in health visiting. So it's definitely something that's been embedded within our health visiting service. But what are our standards? What do we stick to? What's it all about? So these are our 4 standards for health visiting. There are different standards for maternity, for children's centres and for our neonatal units as well. But these ones are particularly relevant for us. So support for pregnant women is all about services which meet local need, are required to support pregnant women for feeding and caring for their baby. It's not expected that this will be a universal service, and it's definitely not something that we can support in health visiting, but rather that a health visiting service will work collaboratively with other services to provide support when it's needed. And then we think about continued breastfeeding. So what do we do to help that journey? So we carry out a breastfeeding assessment at the new birth visit, which is done between day 10 and day 14 by the health visitors. There is specialist help with breastfeeding with an appropriate referral pathway, which is available for all mothers. In our service, this is accessed by referral to the infant feeding team at our acute trusts, and that's me that actions those. Mothers have the opportunity for a discussion about their options for continued breastfeeding, which includes expression of breast milk, feeding when out and about and going back to work, definitely according to individual need. Services are available to support continued breastfeeding and mothers are referred to them. Again, collaborative working is encouraged here as well. Then we move on to informed decisions about other food for babies. So mothers are supported to be able to maximise the amount of breast milk their baby receives, with exclusive breastfeeding up to 6 months being the ideal. But when this doesn't happen, support offered for mothers to keep going within the realities of their situation is imperative. When mothers offer formula feeding, support is offered to help them to do so as safely as possible, whether this is exclusive formula feeding or when mothers start to partially formula feed as well. And there's a system which ensures that mothers are offered information about the appropriate introduction of solid foods at 6 months at an appropriate time. So not telling them that information when they've just had a baby. It's making sure that we get that message out at just the right time for them. And the last standard talks about the importance of close and loving relationships. Parents are supported to understand and respond to their baby's changing developmental needs and abilities, including for touch, verbal and visual communication and being kept close. Parents who are bottle feeding are also encouraged to hold their baby close, look into their eyes during feeding, and we refer to social and educational support when we feel it's appropriate. So who's in the team? Who do we have working and supporting the Baby Friendly Initiative for Berkshire Healthcare? So the Health Visiting Service, we have a really robust team to support these standards. The BFI project itself is led by the infant feeding lead, or me. My role has 2 days protected time to be able to carry out training with staff and managers and to be able to continuously support all my colleagues across all 4 localities. The role requires attendance in local and national meetings with BFI, as well as with our colleagues and infant feeding groups within the South East or the Bob footprint. Collaboration with our external partners to ensure we are meeting the needs of our diverse communities, as well as supporting the local authorities with their infant feeding plans. So I have support from the BFI Guardian. The role of the Guardian is to ensure our voice is heard and issues can be raised directly with the senior exec board. The Guardian will consult on and support with accreditation, but she's not actively involved in the day-to-day project or the day-to-day running. We have 2 BFI lead champions who are health visitors, and they're responsible for supporting to facilitate training to staff. They have attended relevant BFI training to allow them to cascade the necessary learning out to staff across our service. Our team of BFI champions is currently about 12 strong. We have representation from our 4 localities and of all bands. Their role and responsibility is to ensure they are supporting staff with more complex feeding issues, carrying out feeding assessments and support with mothers and babies experiencing more challenging issues. They also take part in our 6 monthly audits and share any learning or updates within their teams as well. Our managers, service leads and all our team members continue to promote and protect breastfeeding by standing by and adhering to the guidance laid down by BFI. Our regular staff audits ensure that knowledge is now very much embedded in practice, and we strive to provide the best evidence-based support for families when it comes to infant feeding. So with any project comes the risk of barriers that may impact on your progression. Within the health visiting service, capacity issues are our most severe risk at this moment in time. Lack of staff and increase in vulnerability within the populations we serve compounds our capacity issues, meaning at times we cannot achieve the depth of service we want to be able to achieve. Our vulnerable clients' needs are met, but are we meeting the needs of our universal client base as well as we could? This is beyond our capabilities as a service and instead falls into the commissioning of our service. Funding cuts we have seen year on year and cessation of breastfeeding support groups, drop-ins or practitioner-led groups can add or increase to our caseload too. This, alongside ineffective updates or training for our GP colleagues or our paediatric colleagues, can compound the amount of support we need to provide. Our midwifery colleagues at the Royal Berkshire Hospital lost their accreditation in 2017 and have struggled to get buy-in to be able to move forward until very recently. As you can imagine, this further impact on the support we give, and we can at times struggle against misinformation or ineffective advice. Once the trust are re-accredited again, which I will be supporting them with, I look forward to a more cohesive, collaborative way of being able to provide that evidence-based information, empathy and support for women and their families. It provides a much better picture. So what's our next step? We're re-accredited. We've been re-accredited quite a few times now, which means that our standards are firmly embedded within our practice. So the next step for us is achieving sustainability or gold standard. So we're currently at silver, but we need to aim higher. We're going for gold. So the Achieving Sustainability Standards are a new set of standards that, as I said, were introduced in 2017, just to further support trusts and areas of practice to ensure that we are doing the best that we possibly can. There's 4 main factors in achieving sustainability. The first being leadership. Knowing that we have a strong leadership team, it's required to drive forward and protect the standards, being able to be alert to risks and threats. There's a named baby friendly lead and a team with sufficient knowledge, skills and hours to meet the objective. The team must also include the baby friendly and guardian. So we've got that one ticked off. That one's good. That one's good to go. Culture. We've got a positive culture within the health visiting service, which firmly embeds the 6 C's, and it's crucial to good service provision. There is support for ongoing staff, learning and facilities for staff to feedback concerns, and systems in place to enable parents to feedback and be heard and acted upon. So we can tick that one off as well. Monitoring. Monitoring is crucial to ensuring that the standards are maintained. This is achieved by regular audits according to the needs of the service, and all relevant data is available and can be accessed by the leadership team and by BFI. That happens, we can tick that one off. It's looking positive, it's looking great. Progression is the last factor in this journey. In an ever-changing environment, it's really important to keep looking at new ways to work and progress. The service needs to demonstrate innovation and progress to be able to provide evidence that demonstrate outcomes have improved. This point also highlights the importance of integrated multi-professional working. So this is our sticking point. This is the last piece of the puzzle that we need to put into place. I know that things will improve in time with Royal Berkshire Hospital going back and being reaccredited. Our partners in Frimley, our partners at John Radcliffe, our partners in Great Western all have accreditation. So that's positive, and it does help. Obviously, the largest amount of our clients fall under the RBH patch. This is where we fall down at the moment. Also, as I mentioned in the barriers section, the information that our GP colleagues give out, they don't have training on infant feeding. This is again a major barrier. And with our paediatric colleagues, that they're not having conditional training within the hospitals that they're working at this moment in time when they start rotation. We know that breastfeeding impacts on so many people's lives and can provide such a good standard of health and well-being for children. This is almost like the starting point of their journey, and breastfeeding provides that good basis for starting. So we want to move forward, we want to progress, and obviously we will be working really, really closely with the Royal Berkshire Hospital to help them gain their accreditation. You know, we're very much a team, and we work together because we're serving the same communities. So it makes no sense to be disjointed. And that's all I have to say.
Kirsty, thank you very much. The most interesting presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Yes, absolutely.
Excellent. Our colleagues, Aileen.
Hi, Kirsty. Great presentation. I personally fed my own babies, and I know the importance and how much it brings you closer to the babies. I wonder if we looked at the link, you mentioned about the physical health benefits that come from breastfeeding. Have we looked at, given we're a mental health trust as well, have we looked at anything around the mental health impacts, or do we know anything about that in terms of the relationships and you know, postnatal depression and things like that?
Absolutely. I mean, there is lots of evidence out there that suggests that having that breastfeeding experience for a mother and baby dyad improves outcomes for mental and physical health. It's very much a joint matter. In terms of the support for women that suffer with postnatal depression, it's very much a catch-22 because it can impact quite significantly on a mother's mental health if breastfeeding is not going well. You have a culture and a fear of blame and failure. It's my fault that I can't breastfeed, which can obviously further impact on a woman's mental health. And we know that our perinatal mental health services, they have lots of evidence and lots of data that actually factor in breastfeeding as one of the main causes of mental health issues within the perinatal period, which, you know, is such a shame. It really is such a shame. And I think there's an awful lot about women recognising the importance of asking for help and not feeling like they have to do it all by themselves. You know, it really does impact greatly on the happy hormones that you produce when you breastfeed. It lifts your mood without you even knowing. By having your baby close to you, by feeding your baby, you naturally produce more of your oxytocin and your prolactin hormones, which increase your mood and help your happy feelings too. So there is a very strong link.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. We've got actually 5 questions, so I think we need to give, you know, fairly swiftly if we may. Tom O'Kane.
Yeah, you mentioned that socioeconomic factors were, you know, a good measure of the divide. Are there any other factors such as ethnicity or something that will split between those that breastfeed and those that don't? And my second question, I'm sorry, was, are there any physical things that mean that a baby can't breastfeed? And I'm relating from personal experience of one to where my granddaughter was born tongue-tied, and if we hadn't exerted a lot of pressure on the trust, I won't say which one, to get it fixed and actually end up doing it privately within a couple of days, if it had been allowed to go on, we were told that she might never want to breastfeed.
So in terms of the socioeconomics and ethnicity, we have such diverse communities that we serve within the Berkshire Healthcare Patch. And the ethnicity does play an awful big part in breastfeeding. So we have some very strong communities that breastfeeding is very much the norm for them. And they're advocates of breastfeeding, and they support their fellow communities to be able to breastfeed more successfully. But their voices aren't very heard. They're not, they don't publicly support. So, it's about engaging with these communities to almost use them as peer supporters, to be that voice, to be that advocate for breastfeeding. In terms of the physical aspects, as I mentioned, primary lactation failure is very, very rare. There are compounding issues such as tongue tie, as you mentioned. Within Berkshire Healthcare, babies should be assessed at birth for a tongue tie. It's part of the newborn physical check that the midwife carries out when the baby is first born. And I know that because I'm a midwife, so I know what I do, or know what I did. It can impact, and there's only about 5% of babies that are born with tongue ties, and out of that 5%, only 5% actually need a division. So we're over dividing when sometimes we don't need to divide, and that's where you need that skilled clinical experience to be able to assess that tongue tie effectively and get the support when we need it. We have strong referral pathways into both Frimley and to RBH for those mums and babies that need that.
Thank you. Is that okay, Tom? Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks.
We've got 6 questions. I do want to give everyone a chance. So if we can be quite brief, and the brief response, Kirsty, then we'll get through everyone and we can get back on the agenda. So I've got Deborah Edwards.
Thank you very much. A really amazing talk you've given and presentation. I again fed all my children, the last 2 being twins, so it was a bit of an adventure every time I had a child. I have 5 children, so it's always going to be an adventure. Anyway, that's beside the point. How are we marketing this? How are we encouraging? What are we doing to encourage new mums to continue till 6 months?
So this conversation is had at our new birth visit when we have first contact, and parents are really aware of the support that is out there to be able to provide that support for them. Unless mothers are willing to engage with that support, there's very little we can do. It is an individualised thing. Breastfeeding is very emotive. So, it is discussed, though, at new birth and again at 6 to 8 weeks to encourage that continuation of breastfeeding up to 6 months and beyond.
Yeah. And can I just quickly add, there seems very little use of public buildings for breastfeeding, or even there are some safe places where you can breastfeed. Do you think we need to talk to our commercial people, our supermarkets and everything like that to see if they can put a room to one side?
So in terms of where women can breastfeed, they can breastfeed anywhere they want to. Shops, buildings, community spaces shouldn't need to display a sign because it's illegal to stop a woman from breastfeeding where she wants to. And we need to sort of move away from a culture of providing a room. We need to make sure that it's a space that women feel that they can breastfeed in regardless and rewardless. So they can walk into a local cafe, or they can sit down in the local supermarket on a chair that's been provided for them and breastfeed openly in front of the general public. That's where we need to get to. It needs to be more normalised. And if you segregate women by providing a room for them, you could impact on those feelings of guilt and shame, and what they're doing is wrong.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom Lake.
Just to say, you've got a really complicated environment, and I really wonder whether you're getting any support from our new integrated care system, and in particular whether you've got, data, appropriate exchange of data. You've got GPs, the acute trust, and all this sort of thing, and the local authorities. So you've got a real, you've got almost everything in the mix.
Absolutely. And I mean, the data is available. We put in data quarterly. So it's available nationally to look with alongside, you know, everybody else in England, as well as our neighbours as well. So that data is out there. It's just is it considered, especially by our GP colleagues? Is it considered data? And actually, I don't think, because there isn't enough training for GPs around infant feeding, their knowledge and skills tend to deplete as time goes on and evidence moves forward. Where we need to get to is a stage where there is a dedicated infant feeding GP within every practice that is able to disseminate and inform their colleagues to ensure that evidence is kept up to date.
Thank you.
Ross.
Thank you. Thanks, Kirsty. Very interesting, but it's prompted a more general question. So this probably isn't for you. I must admit, as a governor, I had no idea that health visiting services were only provided across 4 localities, and wonder how this has come about and what's happening in the other 2 areas. And if this is not the most effective way of providing it across the whole of the Berkshire Trust area, will that change with the integrated care systems?
No, it won't change. Long and short, so I can answer that question. So health visiting services, it went over from NHS funded services to local authority funded services in 2015. As part of that move, it was up to the local authority then to commission health visiting services, and we lost our commissioning in Berkshire Healthcare for both Slough and Windsor and Maidenhead in 2017. They went over to private providers. So in Windsor and Maidenhead, they have Achieving for Children, and in Slough they have Solutions for Health. So neither Achieving for Children or Solutions for Health are BFI accredited, and they have not even started their journey. So services are very different in Slough and Windsor and Maidenhead. They do have support. Obviously, they still have skilled workforce that are able to support with breastfeeding, but they're not part of that same accredited service that has that set of standards. It's not going to change anytime soon. I wish that it would, because that has been the demise of health visiting services as going over to the local authority, but it's not going to change anytime soon.
Thank you, Kirsty. That's very helpful. So, Martin, is there something to take up with the ICS for the future?
Well, it's a running issue. The split between NHS and local authorities, you know, is one of the big issues that we're trying to work on, and the ICS we hope will address some of that, but it's going to take a while, I think, and I can't predict the outcome. We're going to have to move very quickly now. Please, John Wellham, and then.
Right, your last set of information was actually quite disturbing, but the question I really wanted to ask was, I picked up that GPs aren't as well informed and up to date as they might be. You identified that you would recommend that each practice has a lead GP who is up to date. Is the trust able to help them through workshops or any other means?
Thank you. Yeah, I think I just about caught that. Yeah, there are many GP practices across Berkshire, and this is something that I would be unable to facilitate by myself. I would need a large team around me to be able to provide that update. There is a package of learning for GPs to be able to access that BFI have provided, but it's just, you know, do GPs have the time, capacity or funding to be able to access this? Because it comes at a cost. Like everything, it comes at a cost. It is necessary though. We see some quite poor advice being given by our GP colleagues, which we then have to unpick and try and ensure that parents are following the correct evidence-based advice. So, you know, I do think it is necessary, but it's not something that I would be able to provide on my own. I don't have time or capacity.
So it's another area where through the ICB and ourselves, we do need to make the investments right now in the babies helps considerably further down the line.
Absolutely agree, 100%.
Thank you, John. Arlene?
Yeah, hi, Kirsty. I just have 2 related points, and it's to do with sort of social media and digital things. I wondered if you had any information or evidence about the role of social media as either encouraging or inhibiting people, because I know there's been some media stories of people being publicly, embarrassed or shamed for breastfeeding, which I totally agree with you. We should be doing it wherever we want. I certainly did with my children. But I wondered if you had any insights into the current contribution of social media.
So, I mean, I have anecdotal evidence. We provide social media support for breastfeeding mums, and through COVID, we set up some social media accounts, and on our Facebook and Instagram pages, we covered blogs and stories and vlogs, and these were widely viewed, and our breastfeeding pages were some of the most hits that we had across our pages, which was really interesting to know. We also have in Health Visiting a new service that we've launched called Chat Health, which also provides that breastfeeding support. It's a text-based service, so it's an anonymous service that parents and carers can text into, and we then text back with support. So it's another avenue that we have that's improving our digital remit and providing care for those women that may not otherwise engage with health visiting services. But we know that social media works in a positive way.
Yeah, okay. I just wondered if it also put people off. The other thing was just, and it sort of relates to what you were saying about people should be able to go wherever they want and feed. And, as I say, I certainly believe in that. I have a colleague who used to work in Newcastle, and they developed an app with local mothers where they could share information about their experiences in local shops, businesses, libraries, whatever it was, in terms of breastfeeding. And I think it was only in the sort of northeastern locality, but I wondered if you thought something like that could be useful.
I think an app will be useful regardless of whether it's just about breastfeeding. And, I think for everything to do with health visiting services, and my colleagues that know me well know that I'm always up for innovating in that way. So I would agree with your comments. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I'll send you some of the info.
Thank you, Arlene. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Baldev, and then June, and then we'll move on. You're on mute, Baldev.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you, Kirsty, for the very informative presentation that I've seen so far. And I'm coming from a community angle and the voluntary sector, if you like, and I meet a lot of people. And I think is there any long-term benefits you could highlight for the newborns to have the mother's milk as the key developer, if you like, at the early ages? Because I think that there's only from what I know, there's only a small window of opportunity for them to build up their body in a way from the mother's milk, because after a certain time, I think they lose the ability to digest and break down the milk fully anyway.
No, so that's not quite right. There's a small window of opportunity for mothers to be able to initiate and get breastfeeding off to a good start, which provides the milk for the future. But in terms of the benefits for breastfeeding, they're long lasting, they're lifelong. So it's dose related. The more you breastfeed, the more that a baby receives breast milk, the more benefits they will have for the future. Mainly, it builds an immune system. That's one of the biggest strengths of breast milk, and the ingredients that are contained within breast milk are basically all about those immune building blocks, and that's lifelong, and it's lifelong for baby and it's lifelong for mum as well. So benefits for mum's physical health, such as reduction in some cancers, in osteoporosis. There's also a reduction in the risk of developing dementia or early onset Alzheimer's as well. So there are huge community benefits for baby and for mothers. And obviously, we're thinking of recycling and our carbon footprint. That's also a benefit too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Baldev. June, just a quick, please, and then we'll.
Yeah, I just really wanted to come back on Ros's comment, just to be helpful, really. Is that sometimes we as a trust have to make some really difficult decisions and withdraw from tenders, which we did on the health visiting, particularly in Slough. We couldn't get the financials to work to allow us to deliver a safe service that we could be proud of, so we withdrew from the bid. But when it comes up for tender again, we will look again to see whether the financial envelope or the spec is different, and we will reconsider. And we think it's due to come out within the next year for retender. So that's just a bit of background, Ros, to explain why we don't have it in the other counties.
Thanks so much. I think we must draw this to a close now. Kirsty, this has obviously been a fascinating topic and really engaged people in their questions. So thank you very much for what you're doing. Thank you to colleagues for your questions. And Kirsty, we'll let you go now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, colleagues, well, that was really good. And thank you for all your questions. I think if we could now move on, annual audit committee report, we're going down to something more technocratic. And Rajiv, I think I'll hand over to you.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Martin. Now for something completely different, as they say. So Julie has very kindly put together the papers. I think they start on page 13 of the pack. A few things I will mention very briefly. So my fellow NEDs that are on the audit committee with me are Naomi and Mahmuda. I'd like to thank them for their support during the year. And then overall, I continue to be impressed with the work that Paul and his finance team do and the overall controls framework we have in the trust. I'm very pleased with how we're progressing there. I will talk about the external audit very briefly. So we have a new set of auditors this year, which I believe the governors were involved in appointing. So I won't talk about the appointment there, but they gave us an unqualified audit opinion for the year, which is the best you can get, otherwise known as a clean audit report. The next level down from unqualified is a qualified audit report, where they're happy with most of what we're presenting, with the exception of a couple of things. And we were very close this year to getting a qualified audit report because they did have some question marks around the valuation of our properties. But after some excellent work from Paul and the team, we came to a resolution on that point. And I think that is it shows the value of changing your auditors every 3 years, having a fresh pair of eyes look at things, because it did call us to correct one part of the accounts which you wouldn't have done otherwise. And then on the internal audit function, I think in Appendix 2 of the pack, you'll see the internal audit reports for the year. Internal audit give us a rating for each audit report. It's rated out of 4. You can call it A, B, C, D if you like. The best you can get is substantial. That's kind of the A, and the next best is reasonable assurance, which is a B. All of our audit reports that we got during the year were rated either substantial or reasonable assurance, so either in the A or B category. And the overall opinion for the year, when they take into account everything they've done, they gave us a substantial assurance, a reasonable assurance, which is a B, which is the same as what we got last year. They did tell us that for this year, out of all of their clients, only 2% got the A rating. So we're firmly in that B category. So happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you, Rajiv. Any questions? Quite a technical issue. Yeah. I think the point that Tom, you're on mute, Tom.
Yeah. Just to say that one of the issues that we were concerned about in the quality assurance group earlier was about whether, and I know this is a new measure that people are looking at, which is a fairly new measure with the waiting times presentations, were whether we got the right measures for the interests of patients and carers. So we were seeing sometimes waiting times for first appointment, but not to first treatment. And so on. So I wonder if we should acknowledge or that there is still work to do on developing that side of the reporting. And I want to stress it is fairly new. It's got to be, and it will inevitably be in development.
I think it's a fair comment across all of our data that we look at, is we need to have continued improvement in the quality of the data on which we can make decisions.
Okay. Anything else? In which case, Rajiv, thank you very much indeed for that, and we'll move on. The next item is one that could take a few weeks to do, or it could take 5 minutes, which is the Trust's Constitutional Changes Report, and Julie will speak to this.
Yes, thank you. The Trust Constitution was reviewed by our legal advisors. We review it every 3 to 4 years just to make sure that it is fully compliant with good practice and with legislation. And then I'd like to put up thanks to a small group of willing governor volunteers who helped me to review the proposed changes, and particularly to give thanks to Graham Bridgman, who's spent a lot of time reviewing the Constitution and helping with improving its format. The changes are not particularly sort of radical. I mean, the key one is with Health Watch raised an issue that we didn't have a process to review excluded members like we do. We have a process to review vexatious complainants. So we've added that into the Constitution, and we've made it more explicit that meetings can be held virtually, in person or hybrid. And I've set out a summary of the changes so you can see those, and I'd welcome any comments.
Any comments? Tom, is your hand up? Tom Lake, your hand? No? Okay. Any comments or questions? No? Okay, in which case I think, oh, sorry, Deborah.
Hi, sorry. I thought it was excellent work, Julie. Well done. And again, apologies to all for not having my camera on. I know it's not great if you can't see faces. So I thought it was really good. I just had one tiny question about the amendment, which I forget which line it is now, but where it said that governors representing the public and staff. And I just have a tiny worry about, would that be treading on the normal ways in which, you know, the organisation, the foundation deals with its staff and has staff representation and the unions and whatever sorts of things in there. I just was worried. I mean, of course, you may reassure me, but I was just worried if we might be treading on other people's toes if people saw us as staff can just go to governors for complaints, which I didn't feel quite right to me somehow, but I'm happy to be wrong.
I think that's in relation to, we've got staff governors, so we've got public governors representing the public, partnership governors, and we've got staff governors. So I think that's what that's, I'm not entirely sure which section that is, but I think that would be what we wouldn't, you're right, quite right, we wouldn't expect staff to go to public governors, but they could go to, you know, they could raise an issue with a staff governor. You know, the staff governors represent the sort of broad interests of staff, so I think it's in that context.
Is that okay? Deborah, you're on mute. I don't know if you...
Sorry, I said yes, thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay.
I just want to be really sure that people don't misread it, that part of the governor's role is to represent staff grievances, because I don't think it is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, in which case, anything else? Otherwise, we'll say it's accepted by governors. Very good. Thank you very much, Julie, and the governors indeed for all the hard work. Item 8, committee steering groups. We've got a few minutes for this. I think perhaps we'll start with membership and then go to quality and living life as the agenda. So perhaps invite, is it Tom first? Tom, you're on mute. Tom, you're on mute. Thank you.
Right, I beg your pardon.
That's all right.
So we have we had a first meeting, which we had a really excellent talk from the lead at the Recovery College in Bracknell, and there was one, just Bernadette Fisher, and there was one point I wanted to bring out, which was that when we asked her about the feeling of safety, how it is, I mean, it's a difficult thing for people who are out there, they're coming to a recovery college, they're acknowledging that they want to take part in their program when they're out in the world, perhaps after having been an inpatient or having been under treatment of the trust. And she was quite clear about this, that there's really the feeling of patients' perception of safety is really important, and that they take quite a lot of pains with that, and that a key element is the feeling by the patient that their views are that they're respected. So I thought that was a really, I mean, it was quite a penetrating talk, I thought, and I thought this was a lesson, a point of view anyway, which I thought had wider applicability and was really useful. So apart from that, had our first meeting, and we've got our terms of reference, which we briefly discussed. I haven't had any. I've discussed it with Martin, who was happy, and we have not had any further feedback on it. So I'm hoping that it could be approved by the council. Thank you.
Okay, everyone content?
I'm also hoping that we can get back to the item on terms of reference of the audit committee, which I did have some questions on, but we've sort of skipped.
Does it need to be done now? I'm happy to take it now, Tom. If it...
Yeah, well, let's do it now then. So just on the audit committee, looking at the terms of reference, I was wondering whether there shouldn't be a connection with the whole freedom to speak up side of the trust, so with the Guardian, because probably not in our trust, but in you can imagine that in some trusts, an aspect of assurance would be to understand that there was no sort of counter information contrary information coming from the people speaking up. And so that was one question. And the second question was whether the audit committee, or the board indeed, looked at serious incident statistics and never events, which I remember these used to be reported to the CCG, but perhaps they're part of clinical report. I don't know how this works, but I realise that we haven't been seeing these, and we used to see them via the CCG. So I wonder if that's something that we should be seeing.
Okay,
Thank you.
I don't know, on the terms of reference, Rajiv, it may be something you just want to take away and think about as to how, because we don't sort of add things willy-nilly. It wants to be a sort of structured approach. So, Tom, if you're happy, I'll just invite Rajiv to take it away and come back.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. I'm not saying this has to be done immediately. It's something to think about, and that's all I'm bringing up these points. Yeah. Thank you.
And on this, Julian's going to speak, I think, on serious incidents. Is that right, Julian?
Yeah, hi, good morning, Tom. Yeah, the never events and serious incidents, they're reported in public in the board. So first page of the exec report, the first statement is, it hasn't been any never event, so it's done very publicly. So yeah, the board see it and the public see it.
Yeah, must have skipped over it, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot in board report, and that's the issue, isn't it? How much stuff do you include? But no, it's always there. It's a big part of what we do, and certainly serious untoward incidents, both sort of at a high level, what they are and what pattern they fall into on a quarterly and monthly basis is there. But also there's quite a bit of analysis in the quality account and all the rest of it as well about taking the sort of key themes. So there's a lot of information around those two things, Tom.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. John Wellham.
Very quickly supporting Tom. Obviously, I wait to hear what Julian has to say about serious incidents in his later presentation. But it almost goes hand in hand with complaints, and one would hope that actually there is no parallel between the two. But I think it's something that we might want to check for ourselves.
John, you're on a very bad line, but I think it was you were saying you thought the complaint should be taken into account as well as the other incidents, and that is what the executive does. I think we'll have to move on, John. The line's so bad. Perhaps we can come back to it. Could I just invite perhaps Paul Myerscough to do the next report?
Regarding the quality assurance group. Really, there's nothing I want to add to the report. The report is less than one page, so I advise you to read it. There's not a lot of information there, but it's good information. It's a very important group, and the group are still looking for a permanent chair to take over from our last chair. I'm acting chair at the moment, and I will act as chair next time. But after then, I'll be getting towards my expiry date. So please, someone come forward You don't need any experience, and just send me an email and I can have a little email chat with you about it, or we can have a Teams meeting when my Teams get sorted out. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions for Paul? Comments? Okay, Brian, membership and public engagement. Could you just...
Thank you. Yeah. First of all, my thanks to Marcoms for picking up on something we asked for, which is now to start putting out some promotional posts on social media about membership of the Trust. It's going to be a continuing theme of the working group that we're looking at trying to bolster any aspect of underrepresentation, and part of that is to lead on to governor recruitment. We currently have 4 vacancies in the council. I think I'm right in saying it's 4. So we do need to ramp up the work, certainly from New Year, ready for when governor recruitment is launched. So, as I say, it's going to be a continuing theme of our discussion and work.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Any questions, comments? Thank you very much. And I'm sure the move towards getting a greater range of people involved is really important. So, okay, let's move on then to item 9, patient experience Q2. The report's there. Liz unfortunately can't be with us, so perhaps we might, if you've got anything we can sort of note and take away with us, and then come back with the answers. Tom.
Could we just ask for approval for the terms of reference of the Living Life to the Full group?
Oh, sorry, I thought I did that. I thought it was.
Oh,
I think it was agreed.
Thank you very much.
So patient experience. Okay, performance report, Julian's report. Normally it's just we take questions. So any questions for Julian?
Martin, can I just give a quick update on a couple of issues, because the report's often obviously slightly out of date because we send them out. A couple of things that governors will be interested in. Sorry, I'm just going to shut my window. It's a bit noisy. Sun's coming in, it's very hot, so I've opened the window, but it's very noisy. I shouldn't complain. A couple of things. Strike action, industrial action, you'll be interested in that. Can I just sort of confirm that at Berkshire Healthcare, the Royal College of Nursing did not meet the threshold for strike action, and the second was Unison and did not meet the threshold for strike action in Berkshire Healthcare. So there will be none of those categories of staff going on strike. We do have other union membership, but we're not expecting those also to reach the threshold when they do vote, maybe in the new year. At this stage, we can say that. What we know is that quite a number of trusts in our area did meet the threshold for the Royal College of Nursing, and rather than them being a mass strike across the southeast, for example, across Hampshire and everything else, the Royal College of Nursing are focusing on 3 organisations for maximum impact, and they're our neighbours. So they're focusing on the Royal Berkshire Hospital, they're focusing on Oxford Health and Oxford University Hospitals, and the strikes are the 20th and the 28th of December. In addition to that, yesterday, the ambulance services, 10 out of the 12 ambulance services have also voted to go on strike. So our ambulance service is South Central Ambulance Service, often abbreviated to SCAS, South Central Ambulance Service, is going on strike, and that's the 21st of December. Although we're not, haven't voted to go on strike, obviously ambulance services, other trusts limiting their services, we are working to make sure that our GPs out of our service and things like that are ready to take on more work, because that's potentially what might happen. So yeah, that's sort of hot off the press, and that's the latest position on industrial action, which wasn't in the pack, and I hope that is helpful. Other than that, I will just take questions, Martin, leave it to you to.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Julian. Tom, you've got a new question? Tom Lake?
Yes, just to say, actually, on inflation, measuring inflation is a really difficult thing. The government uses something called the GDP deflator, which is about 3.7% and not 10% or whatever. And actually what really matters is whether the trust can meet raising prices on its own purchases, whatever, on and outgoings, whatever they are. So just a warning that when you say you've got a real terms increase, it very much depends on what you're buying and paying out on. Yeah, that's it. Just a sort of comment on that. Thank you very much.
Tom, yes,
I have a
really-
point on patient experience as well. We can take after.
Yeah.
I didn't get my hand up for that fast enough.
Yes, Tom, on the real terms increase, it's a real terms increase in what was previously on the table, not necessarily a real terms increase overall in the context of inflation. Two different things. So there was an offer which the NHS was going to roll into next year, and the additional money is a 2% real increase on that previous offer, not in the context of inflation. Heaven knows what it may be, in 6 months' time.
Okay, thank you for that, Julian. Tom, did you just want to go back to the other question? Was it patient experience? Was it, Tom?
Yeah, sorry, we skipped so fast. I didn't get my hand up. I just wanted to raise the point that there's a couple of in the citation of complaints, there's a couple of points where there's a wait of 4 years on the ADHD assessment. I think. I guess this is historical, really, but it is just something to point up. This was really a case that we had before where it's still a bit unclear, but that treatment on anxiety and depression seemed to be denied because the patient was on a waiting list for ADHD or something. So I thought these were concerning.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the waits for children now, Tom, will be below 2 years by the end of March. And again, happy to do an update as a future council meeting, but we've doubled now the size of the team with investment, and we've doubled the size of our activity. So we're eating into that. I wasn't actually aware of 4 years. It may be that the complainant said that there was 4 years, but I don't think we've waited long as that. But there's certainly been a good number of people waiting between 2 and 3 years. And as I say, the first milestone is to get it down below sort of 2 years, which is still unacceptable, a length of wait, but it will be a stabilised and far improved picture, and then one which we'll work with the ICBs on where they want to go next with that in terms of improvements, which I hope they do. I'd hope that we would start then the following year to try and get down to 12 months and then see where we can improve further. But that's the first landmark, is eliminate all 2 years waiters like they have for elective activity in physical healthcare.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Ros.
Thanks. It was interesting to hear about the health bus, and sounds like a great initiative. And I just wondered, given the progress going forwards within the ICSs of working more closely in partnership with the voluntary and charitable sector, whether whoever's leading on the health bus is working in partnership with, for example, the Bob VCSE Health Alliance, so that it's an opportunity for sharing information about all sorts of other partner organisations as well as trust services.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly work in progress. So Alex, the Deputy Chief Exec, is doing a piece of work with the voluntary sector at the moment, a part of our strategy refresh, and certainly the opportunity both to promote services, but also in potential cases to use the bus as well. So we are offering that out to others where there's obviously a good need. So we provide the driver, and if there's a good opportunity to, get services delivered in an alternative fashion to communities that we traditionally don't serve well, then that is definitely an option. It's sort of early days at the moment, Ross. We've sort of had it on the road for about 5 weeks. And in the first instance, if I'm honest with you, we're just really hammering the kind of children's immunisation, because we're in that time of the year, and we're using it also for staff sort of immunisation at the moment, and sort of just trialing it, because obviously, making sure that where we park up, the whole facilities kind of work and everything else. And we'll be taking stock in the new year. And one of the things that Alex is looking to do is also look at an evaluation to see actually if it does meet the criteria of actually improving access as well over the next, because we've got a 3-year lease on it, so we'd have to make a decision whether it's actually doing what you describe as a bright idea, which I agree with, but are we executing it in the right way? So very happy to take that back, very happy to think about it. As I say, quite early days for us, probably done about 9 or 10 trips so far.
Okay, thanks.
Tom, you've got your hand up. Is that a new hand?
Yes, it's about the operation, the new divisional structure, which is in Julian's report. And I see that there isn't a division between East and West anymore. the sort of big structure. Is that that's going? Is it? Can you just say a few words about that?
Yeah, well, the overall oversight goes, so we'll just have a division for community services and community mental health, but the services will still be delivered at place. So, for example, what's a classic community services? District nursing. So the district nursing teams are not moving at all, but the oversight of them will. So there'll ultimately be some savings in terms of the management costs, which we kind of need to do. But more importantly, what we'll try and do is eliminate unwarranted variation, both in staff experience, patient experience, and service design. So obviously there's warranted variation. The offer and the configuration will be different in Hungerford than it is in Langley and Slough, because it's a different population, different density of population. But the outcomes, outputs, those types of stuff, we're looking to try and make sure we're perhaps more consistent, whilst at the same time obviously linking in with local partners, and delivery of services won't change. I mean, on the ground, it would be mad to centralise district nursing when they obviously are a domiciliary service and need to be based in those communities.
And can I just ask, does this sort of reflect the fact that working with 2 ICSs is sort of starting to bed in, and that it looks workable to just have this uniform structure, which is welcome, I think?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think it's probably a test back to the ICB. So what we'll do is, sometimes there'll be a legitimate reason, won't there, where the ICB wants a bespoke service for a particular population, no problem. But where, for example, we're initiating a national programme like Ageing Well, Rapid Community Response, there is no rhyme nor reason to approach that so radically differently, and it increases overheads, it creates unwarranted variation, and so that structure will probably allow us to yes, quite rightly, as you suggest, Tom, do just that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Tom O'Kane.
Yeah, I just want to say that I was pleased to see the small report on the research grant that the trust received, and that now because I'm one of the things I am interested in, the part that I didn't know about, which is, let me go back one, for the other trust that I'm involved with, which is the Royal Marsden and the Biomedical Research Centre there, they had quite a strong PPA, patient and public involvement engagement, in the bid to be for the biomedical research centres, and I wasn't aware of any. The question would be, was there any PPIE involvement in our part of the bid? And if for things like that in future, I would just like for the governors to somehow be made aware of what's happening there.
Yeah, I have to take that away in terms of because we were a contributor to a bid that Oxford Health put together, and I just don't know that level of detail, Martin.
No, I wouldn't expect you to, but I just wanted to say, number one, it's great that we're involved in research, and the second thing on my bandwagon in my third term is to have better, or to improve the PPIEP as the public and patient involvement and engagement and participation, the full term, and how can we make that better in the future?
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. If there's nothing else, I just got one thing I was going to raise, actually, on any other business, but I'll raise it now, I think, as in terms of discussion. That is just to let you know, if you're not aware, that the current Secretary of State for Health has commissioned a former Secretary of State for Health, Patricia Hewitt, to do a review of the integrated care systems, how they're bedding down, what's working, what's not working, and to recommend to the current Secretary of State what he may wish to decide to do. I've been involved with 2 meetings with Patricia Hewitt, along with other chairs of trusts across the country, and actually she seems to be coming with a very straightforward and helpful analysis of the issues. She has to report first by the 16th of December, which is not very long ago, far away. Initial findings, and then I think it's sort of early January, her full report. So just to let you know, that review is going on, and I think it's really designed to help identify it, because these ICSs are all new, they're all in different states of development across the country. So it's a way of trying to pick out the things that work well and the things that perhaps don't work so well. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. and I'm proposing, with Julie's help, to see if we can get an updated briefing for governors from the 2 ICSs, just so you make sure you hear it directly from them about their current issues. So hopefully that is helpful. Shall we move on? Governor feedback session, just a chance really for governors to raise anything that they've been doing they want to raise, if you wish. No? Any other business? Anyone? Okay, in which case the date of the next meeting is the 1st of February 23. That's the joint non-executive directors and council of governors. So I think I need to wish you all